Hi, everybody. I would like to welcome everyone who took the time to join us today for this webinar about Scribe's tool, Valint. Now, today's webinar is new to me because unlike other webinars where I have interesting guests, today's interesting guests are actually my coworkers. We have today Danny Nebenzahl, our CTO and co-founder of Scribe, and Mikey Strauss, who's our lead developer. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for taking the time to joining me and explaining about Scribe's Valiant. So, first question to you, Danny. Because I don't want to dive right into hands-on demonstrations and code, and people have no idea what we're talking about, let's give them a little bit of background. Scribe, as we know, is a software supply chain security company. So let's start in the beginning and explain what is exactly a software supply chain. Why is it called a chain, and why is its security important?
Thank you. I'll answer through an example. So think about the bank's app on your phone. Now imagine I'm an attacker. I want to attack the bank's customers. So I could do it, one by one, attack each one who's using the app. That's not fun. But I could attack the software producer who produced this app. And through installing malware inside it, I could attack all the customers in one shot. So this is an example of a software artifact, which is a result of a software supply chain. And we immediately understand the importance of securing it. Why is it a chain? Because no one produces today, modern software is not produced by a single developer who does all the work. Software is a result of combining many other software pieces and services together. And you can imagine an assembly line where these pieces are put together to produce a final artifact.
That's a pretty good explanation, although I'm pretty sure that the bad guys don't just do bad things because it's cool or fun. They usually have other interests. So what is Scribe's approach to meet this challenge? How do we secure the software supply chain?
So we want to enable software producers to demonstrate to their customers that their software can be trusted. And the way we do it is that we collect evidence along the software build processes and then evaluate these evidence against policies in order to prove that the software can be trusted.
Cool. So transparency and the ability to trust software sounds like good things to me, but you spoke about evidence. Because I'm not sure everybody understands what evidence means, how about you give a few examples? What exactly that the word evidence here entails?
Okay, so the most famous evidence today is the SBOM. An SBOM generated at the end of the pipeline, which is evidence about what the software piece includes. But we take SBOMs much further and use them as a container of many pieces of data about the software being produced at specific points along the pipeline. So an SBOM of a Git repo will have many more additional data items that can enable various policies. Salsa provenance, which is a piece of evidence that connects the artifact to the repo from which the sources of it were taken, is another type of policy. Is this a snapshot of your software security settings of your GitHub account could also be an example of an evidence.
Cool. For those of our viewers who are not clear on the terminology, an SBOM is a software bill of materials, and a Salsa stands for supply chain levels for software artifacts, which is one of the most prominent security frameworks in use today. Still in beta, but still in use. Developed by Google, it's very popular. So, because we spoke about evidence, and evidence, as we all know, is important, police usually works very hard to make sure it's not contaminated or faked. How do we make sure, how does Scribe make sure that we're dealing with the evidence that we've collected and not with any falsified evidence, that people are not just saying that they're secure without actually being secure.
Thank you. So the basic answer is signing and verifying, signing wherever we can and the earliest we can each piece of evidence, and verifying each time we use it. And we support many signing mechanisms and settings.
I see that we have here how Scribe actually works. So that is actually my next question. How about we put it all together? How does Valiant intersect with what Scribe does, and how does it all come together?
Okay, so to deploy Scribe's solution in a pipeline, you would need to deploy our tools in the pipeline. And the tool we're talking about today is Valiant. This is a tool that's run in the pipeline. And in addition, you can connect our platform to other APIs like the GitHub API to consume the GitHub security posture of your account. And you can also connect to other evidence providers like SBOMs you would get from downstream the supply chain.
Mm-hmm. I would like just to add another clarification. When we speak about signing, verifying, obviously we don't mean that we're going to print pieces of evidence and stamp at the bottom that it's been signed or verified. We're going to use cryptographic tools to digitally sign pieces of evidence and then verifying it, but we'll see more of that in a bit. So Mikey, so far we've heard about the theory, how does it theoretically work, which is all nice and good, but that's not why people are here. So based on what Danny said, the main focus of Scribe is evidence collection, evidence verification. Where does the tool that you wrote, Valint, gets into this?
Yeah, so hi everybody. Valiant in practice is a tool to orchestrate the evidence lifecycle. And what I mean by that is that it allows you to generate some evidence or collect it from third-party tools, like you've seen in the diagram. But it also enables you to store them in different storage capabilities, sign them with different signers, and finally, I think the most important part is consumption and policy verification, which is basically the entire ecosystem of the evidence, moving from creating to verifying something.
Cool. You mentioned in passing other pieces of evidence or third-party pieces of evidence. I think it's very important to note that Valiant doesn't only allow us to generate our own evidence. We can also take other third-party company pieces of evidence, like scans you do on your software, other tests that you run, any other company that does things along the pipeline that you want to store as evidence. We can do that, which is, I think, a very important capability. So now that we spoke about the theory of Valiant, how about we finally see something in action? How about we see how Valiant works with a small example of creating a signed piece of evidence and then verifying it?
Yeah, so let me share my screen. Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, so we'll start with an example of running Valiant. As I said, Valiant is a tool. So in this instance, it's a CLI tool running locally in my machine. And in this example, I'm going to create a SBOM. That's why you see the word bomb here, the command. And I'm going to do that given a image. Okay, in this instance, I'm going to use BusyBox, which is a very popular image upstream from Docker Hub. And I'm going to request that Valiant signs this with some kind of PKI cryptography, right? It's worth saying that we support other types of evidence, like we mentioned before, like Salsa and third-party tools. And we also support different targets, like you can create evidence for a Git repository in the same way you can create evidence for an image. Now let's run this command. I'm not going to get into the specific signing mechanism, but We're, in this example, using my email as a signer identity, like the access to my Google account. But check out the documentation for other mechanisms. We have simpler and more complex flows. This is the Sigstore keyless flow. Whoever wants to look it up, super cool open source. Yeah, so most importantly, we see in the logs the identity that I actually signed with. So this is what is signed in the certificate that matches the signature. And the signer identity, which is in this instance, Sigstore. Now to the second part, we may want to verify at some point the evidence or verify the image. So sorry about that. I'll clear my screen in a sec. Yeah, okay, here you go. So this command is basically the same. The only real difference is instead of output format attest, I want an input format attest. The input of the evidence should be signed, and the identity that I actually want to verify on. You can see the verification details in the logs, but just to give you, I'll change the email and see it fails. Yeah. So back to you, Barak.
Thanks. Now that we saw a very small example of creating a signed piece of evidence and then verifying it, how about we try to take it a bit, bigger image? How does one actually use this in a day-to-day setting? Let's say you're a DevOps, you have multiple pipelines, multiple platforms. How do you use this tool as part of your everyday workflow?
Okay, so Valint is released as a binary, as I said before, for Windows, Linux, any OS you may require. And you can normally you will pull the image, pull the binary, okay, and run it in any platform you want. But in CI platforms and in the supply chain game, everything is orchestrated and everything is automatic. So we support a range of CI platforms. Let me share our documentation. We'll share the link also in the comments in a second. So as I said before, you can check out how to run Valiant on any platform using the binary or the image. But check out GitHub Actions or Azure Pipeline, Circle CI, and so on. Each one has its own set of, sorry about that, own set of integration capabilities.
Cool. Well, definitely the answer to how you employ it is go check the documentation. It's probably written there. And I tell you something, if it's not there or it's not clear, I'm the address. Write to me, and I'll make sure it's fixed. So Danny, apart from collecting and verifying evidence, Valiant also collects other things like metadata or the context of the evidence. What exactly is that context that we're collecting?
You can imagine the evidence as a snapshot, and the context, as its name suggests, as the context where this snapshot has been taken in terms of software supply chain. So on what machine, what was the Git repo, what was the branch hash, who was the user, what was the build script running, what's the image that's being sampled, and much more pieces of information that identify, the location in the pipeline. This location information has many uses. One is to address the data. When you have a large collection of evidence, you need a way to pull the right evidence for the right policy, and this enables us to do this. And it enables also supporting investigations. For example, if I want to understand the blast radius, suppose a specific machine in my software factory has been compromised, I want to understand what are all the artifacts that could be affected by this machine. So I could pull all the evidence that was generated on this machine and then follow the dots to other evidence that are connected to this piece of evidence, like use the same repo, use code that was deployed from this machine, And so that I can understand exactly what are the artifacts that were affected from a specific machine in the build process.
So basically, people can think about all this context, like all the information that follows a piece of police evidence in one of those little baggies. There's a whole bunch of information that follows that piece of evidence, like where it's from, what time, who took it, what were the circumstances, what crime it was connected to, so that all those pieces of evidence, or that pieces of description, can help us basically put that piece of evidence in the right box and pull it out at the right time when we need it. Mikey, because your tool is the one using all that pieces of evidence and the context, what do you actually use it for?
Yeah, so thank you. It's a good question. Yeah, the context practically is used for the verification part, and I'll explain why. It allows us to say, as we said before, where the evidence came from, the origin of it, and it also describes parts of the subject, like who is the evidence, what it's trying to describe, and this relation allows us to enforce this in the policy. So if I want to say my image comes from a specific build, I don't want to say it's enough. I have an image signed. I want to say it's signed by my build, by my actual pipeline. So that is the origin, for example, connection. But I think a more complex one to think about is the relation between evidence. Like if I have two pieces of evidence, what is the relation between them, and what requirements do I want these relations to reflect?
Mm-hmm. Can you give an example to that last sentence just to make it clearer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I want my policy to verify a specific sources generated a specific image. So there may be two sections, one collecting information about the source lifecycle and one collecting about the image lifecycle. And there may be a connection between them. So the context includes this relation. It's saying this commit created this image, so I can.
Okay, well, I definitely think that our viewers would like to see a practical example, because there's only so much that people can understand about this topic just with words. So we mentioned policies, you mentioned a couple of examples. How about we see an actual example of a policy, you explain how it works, and then we'll see it in practice.
Yeah, so let me share my screen. Oh, yeah, let me share my screen. One sec. Sorry, I opened a wrong terminal.
It's fine.
Here you go. Can you see my terminal?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So I think the best way to look at the policy is look at a actual policy configuration. This policy is going to mimic what I said before. I want to verify the origin of my images. Okay. So let's start with the name of the policy. It's whatever you want. Then I'm selecting verify artifact. We have various types of modules that we support. Verify artifact talks about where evidence came from and who is the identity that created it. So the fields that you need to fill in, or whatever you customize your policy to, is, do you want your image to be signed? So I will say yes, okay, for this answer. What is the format of the evidence? In this instance, I'm picking Cyclone DX as a format for the evidence. We support other formats as well. The identity. And now I'm getting to the context instrumentation. In this example, I'm saying I want this image to come from the local setup, which obviously, if previously we've seen this command is local, I'm using my own machine here. So it will be signed by the local context. So if I try to verify with this policy, okay, I'm giving Valiant at the end of this command, I'm giving Valiant the configuration of the policy. It will verify, and you can take a look at the logs that it's using the policy verification, and everything is according to the requirements. It's actually my identity, and we actually found a signed SBAM for this evidence. But let's try and break it, for example, and require the image to come from GitHub, okay? So obviously, if I try to run this, it's going to fail, that it's not finding evidence that comes from GitHub. But the idea is if you do instrument this into GitHub, it will verify it came from there. Yeah.
So if I understand this correctly, looking at that essential template of a policy, there's any number of things you can require. And like you said, you can do it sequentially. So you can request several things one after the other and decide what is signed, what isn't, where it came from, by whom. There's a whole number of things that policies can check.
Yes, so it expands very rapidly, and verify artifact is only one of our options.
Cool, good to know. Definitely keeps us waiting to see more. Danny, how are these policies managed and deployed? Now that we saw an example of one, how do our clients actually use them? I mean, which part is Scribe's part? Which part is the client's part? How is it all coming together?
So we support a variety of options. What we just saw can be deployed by a customer and like be part of his project's repo, like a policy for this project, and it will be automatically run when Valiant runs on the pipeline based on this repo. Some of the policies can or need to run at Scribe. Policies that consume external data that we bring to the table, like intelligence in which we enrich the evidence, or evidence that the backend consumes from APIs of the customer's development platforms, GitHub and GitLab and so on. So this data is available at the backend, and the policy evaluation happens at the backend. I would like to give an example. So suppose we want to do a Salsa evaluating if a software artifact complies to the Salsa requirements. So in this case, we have two pieces of evidence. One is the Salsa provenance object, which is produced as a pipeline and uploaded to the Scribe SaaS. And we have a security posture attestation about the build platform and the source code management platform that is generated at Scribe. These two pieces of evidence can be connected by the pipeline run number, which is part of the context. So we can connect the right pieces together and have the right evaluation. And uses these two pieces together, we can go on and through the checklist of Salsa and make sure that the artifact was compliant to all the requirements. Barak? Something got stuck.
Okay, so
Danny,
I'll
can you hear
continue.
me?
Yeah.
Okay, Danny, we were experiencing technical difficulties, so I missed part of your answer. Could you please answer again? You were talking about using Salsa and putting it all together.
Yeah. Okay. So I suspect you were the one who.
Repeat your answer, please.
Yeah. So I'll repeat my answer at least for Barak. Let's imagine Salsa policy evaluation. So Salsa policy requires both a provenance document, which is generated somewhere around the pipeline. In our case, generated by Valint in the pipeline. And it also requires a security posture attestation that is generated by Scribe's backend by accessing, in the case of GitHub, accessing GitHub. And the evidence would come from the pipeline. The provenance evidence would come from the pipeline to Scribe's backend and would be matched using the context fields to the right security evaluation. And using this information, we can go through the checklist of Salsa and make sure the artifact was compliant.
Awesome. So basically, you're saying that there are policies that the client can write themselves, and basically those can be whatever they want. There are policies that Scribe can supply, and there are policies that are already built in to our platform, like verifying that a particular project is Salsa compliant or SSDF compliant, which is great. That's good information to have. Before we head out to a couple of our last questions, I would like to encourage any of our viewers to have questions, both about Scribe's platform or Valiant itself, or questions to Danny or Mikey, to type them into the chat so that we can see them and hopefully answer them. Just in case you have questions but you miss the window, you can always write to me, barak@scribesecurity.com. I'll gladly answer your questions if I can, and if not, there are other people here who can answer them. So now that we've talked about the theory and the software supply chain and collecting evidence, verifying it, policies, the room or the place of Valiant as a tool in all of this, let's talk a bit about the future. So Mikey, what are Valiant's next steps? Where are we taking this tool?
Yeah, so Valint today is like the skeleton of orchestrating this evidence. And the next step is the expansion of the verification. Now, today we'll focus on security frameworks like Salsa, SBOMs, and in Toto, which are basically for security evaluation of supply chain and this continuous kind of operation. But the expansion will include also quality assurance or legal license verification. Valiant does not have to scope itself into security because attestation is a secure object. The transparency module helps a lot of other fields. So that's where I see it going.
Well, that's a good answer, and I'm really hoping to get to see it soon. So, Danny, now that we know where Valiant as a tool is heading to, how does Scribe intend to use this tool to, better help everybody secure their software supply chains?
So our plans are to enlarge the number and types of evidence that we support. So in addition to what we already have, to support many types of attestations and to have out-of-the-box policies for all of them, so it will be easy for our customers to deploy. We're also working on policy as code to enable our customers write their own policies on their own evidence, and that would bring most flexibility to our customers. And we are also working on some agentless deployments in which Valiant runs as part of our backend, and which makes in many scenarios the deployment much easier.
Cool. I also would like to add, because I happen to know this since I work here, that Valiant can be run separately from Scribe. It's a tool, just like Mikey said. It's a binary. You can download it. You can play with it yourself. You don't have to upload any sort of evidence to Scribe. If you have a system that you would like to keep completely separate, that it's completely off the grid, as it were, you can download Valiant, put it on your servers, and just play with it as you like, including building your own policies. Now, since if you have any questions, now would be a good time to ask, but I'm going to start, winding this down. Based on everything that we've covered here today, software supply chains are a potential problem. It's important to be aware of it. It's important to keep transparency of all the problems that you inherit or get into your products. It's important to know not only what you have, but what you can do with all that information that is just floating around there. Collect all the evidence, sign it digitally and cryptographically so that you can able to both verify that it's what it is there and create your own policies so that you can check whatever it is you want to check. Scribe right now and Valiant is free, at least to start with. There's absolutely no reason not to go on a Scribe security website, check it out, play with it, see what kind of capabilities and other uses it can give you, whether it fits your use case or not. If it doesn't and you have other ideas, we'd love to hear about them. And if there are no questions, I think that would be a good time to say bye, and I would love to see you in our next webinar. Thank you so much. Feel free to write with any other questions that come to mind.